Hey guys, welcome to the Massive Iron channel. I'm Steve Shaw. In this video, I'm going to give you 3 secrets to building a bigger deadlift now. Before I get into this topic, if you guys need coaching, it's what I do for a living. I'd love to work with you. I'd love to help. Please check out the link down below. All right, so 3 secrets to build a bigger deadlift now. Why do I call them secrets? Well, basically because these are things I use with my clients, things I use with members on Team Massive Iron, but things you might not have heard about. So I want to share with you some of the things that I use to help others build a bigger deadlift. Now, when I say build a bigger deadlift now, if you implement them now, you should see some changes in your deadlift strength over the course of the rest of the year. So I would implement these or consider implementing them, give them a try, and I think you'll find they are beneficial for improving your deadlift strength. All right, number 1, stop pulling from the floor every week. This is something I was using, a tactic I was using when I was at my strongest. Instead of pulling from the floor every week, I would pull using a rack pull every other week. Now, I want you to avoid pulling from a above the knee position or right below the knee. Basically, a rack pull or a block pull is going to be 2, 3, 4, or even 5 inches off the ground, but it's not going to be a high rack pull. What I found when I switched over to rack pulls was that I was very weak, or I was weaker on the rack pull or block pull relative to my deadlift strength. Most lifters that I work with find the same thing, meaning when they try a rack pull or block pull, they are weaker than what their floor deadlift is. In fact, Louis Simmons, the powerlifting legend, found the same thing with a lot of his stronger deadlifters. It's a different movement profile. It's a different type of lift. The leverages are slightly different. So this is a good complement for somebody that wants to bring up their deadlift. Deadlift from the floor, whatever program you're using on week 1. And then week 2, do some block or rack pulls from 2, 3, 4, 5 inches off the ground. This should help your deadlift. Now, one little nuance when you're trying a rack pull or block pull, instead of trying to pull it the same way you pull a deadlift, because the leverage profile is a little bit different, I want you to think about pulling up and leaning back as you pull. This will help you get in a little bit more leverage-friendly position for the rack pull or the block pull. Now, as your rack pull or block pull strength is moving up, you can almost be assured that your deadlift strength is moving up as well. All right, tip number 2, and this is something I've fallen in love with personally the last year. Everybody is currently in love with the Romanian deadlift, and while it's a fine lift, I want to give you a different variation for the posterior chain that I would consider rotating in every other week, and that is the stiff leg deadlift. Now, the stiff leg deadlift functions differently from the Romanian deadlift. During the Romanian deadlift, you try to drive your hips back to lower the weight. And the whole point is to drive your butt back, to load the hamstrings, to get the hamstrings into a stretch reflex position. And then you drive your hips forward after the glutes can no longer move back. So the Romanian deadlift is not about depth. It's about loading the hamstrings. Now, the stiff leg deadlift is different. You're going to pull off the floor just like a regular deadlift. Your knees are going to be slightly bent. But the difference here with a stiff leg deadlift compared to a regular deadlift is that your hips are just going to be just slightly below your shoulders. You're going to really brace your core, brace your lower back, and you're going to pull from that position. So hips slightly below your shoulders, knees just slightly bent, brace the core and pull up. This is a great deadlift variation that transfers some of the stress to your lower back. Now, generally, extra lower back stress on posterior movements can be counterproductive for a lot of newer lifters, but if you've built up a reasonable amount of strength, I have found that the stiff leg deadlift is actually a better lower back builder and a good exercise choice to work into the mix if you're trying to build a good quality deadlift. So again, I wouldn't do this every week. I'd probably do it every other week in rotation with the Romanian deadlift. And if you're using tip number 1, where you're working in the block pull, I'd probably do deadlifts on week 1 and then maybe stiff leg deadlifts as well. I like to transition from deadlifts to stiff leg deadlifts when I'm training on deadlift day. And week 2, you could do the rack pull and then Romanian deadlift. The Romanian deadlift tends to be a little bit more challenging physically for me, so I would do it with a more moderate deadlift variation like the block pull. All right, tip number 3, we need to get your yoke strong. We need to get your trap strong. We need to get your yoke, this area above your shoulders, as strong as possible. Now, one thing I've been doing with my clients is moving them to something I call massive shrugs. Basically, some people are a little bit afraid of doing the power shrug variation, so we're going to work with that. We're going to get you into the gym and we're going to do some mind muscle-y type of shrugs. And then when you reach that quality fatigue level, we're going to switch over into overdrive and finish off with power shrugs. So basically, you want to do about 8 shrug reps where you're pulling it up, holding for a second, and then controlling it down. Do this about 8 reps, okay, until you pick up that quality fatigue. And then we're going to start to do power shrugs. And you can do power shrugs until you can't take the punishment anymore. This is a kind of way to pre-exhaust with a lighter progression, and then once you pick up fatigue, to move on to a more quality or intense progression, which is the power shrug. So give this a try on shrug day. Let me know what you think. You can either use this in place of power shrugs, or you can use it every other week. So guys, give these tips a try. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.